Hello, my name is Nicole Tuchinda, and I am an assistant professor and director of the health law program at Loyola University, New Orleans College of Law. I just wanted to provide some information about studies that show that teachers in public schools have biases that support disproportionate discipline and even school brutality upon Black children. And this video is meant to add to and supplement the um, recording I made with Guy Stevens for the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint that showed that there is a history stemming from slavery that helps to explain why Black children are disproportionately treated with physical force in public schools by adults. So, despite our very best intentions, racial bias is alive and well in schools, is what Tracy A. Benson and Sarah Fierman, who used to be public school principals, said when they studied um, disciplinary differences in the treatment of Black and white students in public schools. Um, so, unfortunately, there are news stories that regularly document the use of racial slurs by some public school teachers and school administrators, and they come up and are highlighted by news stories. Some of these officials still remain employed at public schools, but I think the bigger problem is actually hidden or implied bias, which includes unconscious bias, which is bias that is past our conscious thoughts to the invisible thoughts that drive our behavior when we're not watching. And that is a quotation from Tracy Benson and Sarah Fierman when describing what hidden bias is. So, hidden bias includes views that might seem so ordinary and acceptable that a person expresses them privately to friends or during a moment of frustration. An example of this occurred in October 2022 when LA City Council President Nuri Martinez told fellow council members during a moment of frustration that another council member was, quote, raising his misbehaving son like a white kid. I and she was quoted as saying, I was like, this kid needs a beat down. Like, let me take him around the corner and then I'll bring him back. And she later ended her time as LA Council president after being recorded as saying that about a Black child. So that is an example of implicit or hidden bias, which and there's evidence that such bias exists in the educators at public schools. So various observers and studies have described the hidden racism in public schools. And the studies reveal themes of white fear and suspicion of Black people, including perceptions of Black children being older than they are, and beliefs that they are intrinsically guilty and inferior compared to white children who are seen as more innocent. And such biases have justified control of Black bodies, and former principals Tracy Benson and Sarah Fierman have said, quote, buried in our unconscious as Americans, we believe that white students are more worthy of probing questions, second chances, and deeper learning. And we act in ways that are more committed to the success of white students. We're committed to treating Black and brown students with more suspicion, more pity, more wariness, lower expectations, and lower concern. So I just want to highlight a few of the studies to a few of the studies that highlight the bias. So, for instance, in 2015 and 2016, Denver Public Schools commissioned a study to capture the experiences of African American teachers They did 70 interviews. They did interviews of 70 teachers and administrators and found that many teachers were, quote, outright afraid of Black students, and that fear promoted the disproportionate discipline of Black students. Young white female teachers who comprised the disproportionate majority of the Denver public school workforce were particularly fearful of Black students, and that fear kept them from forming meaningful relationships with many of them. And many of the study participants provided examples of white students with similar offenses who were not disciplined as harshly as Black students. For instance, some of the participants recounted how a white student who threw chairs around the classroom was promoted to a higher level math class because educators deemed that his actions were a result of boredom, while the school suspended the black student suspended a black student simply for balling his fists in the classroom. And the study also found that teachers who were not Black did not expect Black students to do well in the classroom, which affected the perception and vigor with which teachers approached those students. In another study, former school principals Amanda Lewis and John Diamond spent 5 years gathering data and conducting interviews of students, parents, and teachers at a highly resourced Midwestern integrated integrated suburban school in a liberal community. They didn't name the school, but they spent 5 years studying it. And they observed teachers in their daily interactions with students, and they observed that being white provided racial privileges not available to Black students. So specifically, they found, and by the way, they summarized their findings in a book called Despite the Best Intentions, How Racial Inequality Thrives in Good Schools. And what they found was that there was the tacit assumption that Black students would misbehave and break rules more often than white students. And thus, when students did break rules, their behavior was interpreted differently based upon race. So educators perceived white students as having good intentions, and they often received a second chance to behave appropriately before receiving punishment. And white students received less punitive punishments and had more autonomy and control of where they could go and control of their bodies with regards to being able to walk anywhere on campus without interruption. Meanwhile, teachers more actively monitored Black students, referred Black students for less serious and more subjective violations, such as defiance, and gave Black students harsher punishments. So campus police stopped Black students more than white students, and school staff commonly asked Black students to present hall passes and punish them if they didn't have them. And the researchers concluded that their study revealed implicit widespread bias and beliefs in the inherent threatening criminality of Black people, and which manifested in control of the students' movements, the movements of the students. And then regarding gender, the researchers observed that Black girls' dress was more closely scrutinized than white girls' dress in relation to the school discipline code. And to the researchers, that this suggested that school staff assumed that Black female bodies were hypersexual, while white female bodies were more innocent. And in summary, the researchers found that teachers operated with the best intentions, yet widespread cultural beliefs and racial stereotypes permeated teacher-student interactions. So that, just to repeat, was in the book, Despite the Best Intentions, How Racial Inequality Thrives in Good Schools. And then in terms of other studies, there was a study in 2015 by Jason Okono-Fua and Jennifer Eberhardt that studied teachers, and basically they asked teachers to rate the severity of the appropriateness of sanctions for misbehaviors, and the misbehaviors were identical between the different student groups, except that one student was a black boy and one a white boy, and the teachers reviewed the disciplinary records of these two fictional students, one with a stereotypically black name and one with a stereotypically white name. And teachers reported feeling more, quote, troubled by the offenses of the black boy, and were more likely to recommend severe punishment for that student after a second similar infraction compared to the white boy with the same record. Researchers asked the students how certain they were of the child's race, and teachers who reported being more certain were more likely to label the black child as a troublemaker and report that the student's behavior was part of a pattern rather than a single occurrence. Then there's a famous study that occurred at Yale that involved studying teachers' gazes, and this was done by Walter Gilliam and colleagues in 2019, sorry. And basically, in this laboratory experiment, the researchers at Yale told early educators to expect challenging behaviors, even though there weren't any present, while watching a video of preschoolers engaging in typical activities. And the researchers studied the gazes of the teachers and found that teachers gazed longer when they looked at black children, especially black boys, and compared to other children who were not black. And then in another task, educators read a standardized vignette of a preschooler with challenging behavior and were told the child's name, with the name randomized to imply that the child was either a black boy, black girl, white boy, or white girl. And but basically, the study suggested that white educators perceived black children as being more suspicious and blameworthy of wrongdoing. And then there was a study that involved 123 undergraduate students who reported on the perceived innocence of white children, black children, or children in general. And the participants completed a questionnaire asking questions such as, how much are white 0 to 4-year-olds a danger to others? And researchers found that black children of age 10 and older were seen as significantly less innocent than other children of other races. And the study was conducted by Philip A. Goff and colleagues in 2014. And then there are studies that show that biases in perceptions of the age of black children occur so that black children are seen as older than they are, and this bias is called the adultification of black children. For instance, a study of 59 undergraduate students showed participants pictures of children ages 10 through 17 who had reportedly committed a crime, and then when participants were asked to estimate the age of the child by looking at the pictures, the participants overestimated the age of black felony suspects by 4.5 years above their actual age, meaning that black boys were seen as legal adults at roughly the age of 13.5 years old, but the age of white children was not overestimated. And this study was done by the Philip A. Goff crew in 2014. And by the way, the study that I mentioned earlier about the 123 undergraduate students was actually done by Jayanti Owens and Sarah McLanahan in 2020. So, and then finally, there were other studies that showed that so with regards to the Goff and colleagues study, the researchers also found that police officers who were looked at personnel file data, and so researchers studied the personnel files of um, police officers who participated in the study, and they found that um, there was that the more that the black children were considered older than they were, the more likely the police officer was to have acted with actual force against suspects. And so you can see in that study a really powerful demonstration of how adultification of black children um, is, increases their risk for being treated with physical force in real life by police. So, in summary, these studies help to show that bias, especially hidden bias, is real, and it's a serious threat to the well-being and education of black children. And it also explains not only the disproportionate school brutality upon black children, but also disparities in test scores and graduation rates that black children endure. So, and the fact that the population of black children comprise about 16% of the student population across the nation, and yet only 7% of our country's teachers are black. The disproportionate use of violence against black children in public schools sends multiple negative messages, including um, uh, strengthening views that black students are not as academically astute or that they are troublemakers. And it also amplifies the view that black youth are inherently suspect and dangerous while white youth are inherently innocent. And even though this violence is enacted under race neutral policies and practices, they reinforce negative stereotypes and dominant racial belief systems, and they reinforce racial hierarchies. So I hope that you found this information to be useful in understanding why black children are treated differently than white children in public schools, especially with regards to the use of force. And please contact me if you have any questions. You can reach me at nptuchin at loyno.edu, loyno.edu. Have a good day. Take care. Thank you for listening.